what's going to be how's it hanging? How's it happen? You guys know this is Kevin from the Chord Progression Podcast, sponsored by Dark Fusion Systems, the best for your custom computing technology needs. Whether it's for gaming, music, creative, anything, Dark Fusion Systems is the way to go. You get $100 off your entire custom build using the code CPPOD at darkfusionsystems.com. Mention it anytime throughout your build or at checkout. You'll get the $100 off. Thank you guys. Now in our feature presentation, Andrew from Project 86 is back once again. The brand new album, OMNI Part 2, comes out on January 12th. In this episode, we've dived deep into the album once again, but we also dive deep into the creative side of it and why keeping that disillusion as an artist and as a person is paramount for just the best life possible. Trust me on that one. I fully agree with this. We dive deep into it. Are you guys ready? Let's go! Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, listeners of the Chord Progression Podcast, back in early 2023, we brought this guy in the podcast right here talking about OMNI Part 1, a massive album that came out back in March, and now I'm super excited for the fact that we get to dive back in this whole entire thing again because Part 2 is releasing on January 12th, 2024, and I enjoyed OMNI Part 1 a lot. Now, we get the second part of it. Holy shit! Okay, you're going to be excited as me right now as when I say this. Please welcome Andrew from the band Project 86 to the podcast. So, Andrew, welcome back.
That was great, man. Thanks for having me. What an intro. My energy is just at 11 now.
Oh, I was hoping to get it to 12. I was trying to go past the Spinal Tap amp on that one. I'm like, this one goes to 11, but we're trying to crank it a little bit more.
A little more. You always got to have a little more.
You always got to. Yep, absolutely. Always got to have a little more. Well, I want to jump into it right away because the last time we had you on, OMNI Part 1 had just come out. We dove deep into the album. We really got deep into it. And now, as we go ready for the release of OMNI Part 2, what was the reaction to OMNI Part 1 overall over the course of the year, and how did a lot of people take to it from your perspective?
Man, it was a phenomenal response. And, of course, I wouldn't be, an artist, a musician, a band dude if I didn't hype it and make it sound like, oh, people think it's the best record we've ever made. Of course, that's what everybody's going to say when you ask that question, right? But genuinely, I kind of set out, and myself and my squad set out on an impossible task for this record, and that was to genuinely create something that was not only the best music that's ever come out from my camp, but also do it in a way that has a conceptual base, a conceptual foundation, tells a story, has a narrative and such, and do it in a way that the sound is fresh, you know what I mean, that it's brand new. All that comes down to basically completely reinventing everything that I do, which is kind of, I don't know, wild and ambitious, I guess, on my end, but that was what would make it exciting for me. So the reception to OMNI Part 1, and I'm not going to say that every single person who has listened to the record says this, but an overwhelming amount of people have said that this is by far the best thing the band's ever put out, which was super encouraging. And people wanted more. I mean, that was the overwhelming sentiment was, when's Part 2 coming? We can't wait for Part 2. So now Part 2 dropping January 12th, 2024 it's a different thing than Part 1, but they all fit together, 23 songs into this world. And we really created something, I believe, this time around that has no fluff. So Part 1 is this journey. It's a little bit more cinematic, I guess. There's a lot of highs and lows in terms of, ebb and flow and really heavy moments and really serene moments. And it's long, it's lengthy. The songs are long. There's a lot of movement to it. Part 2 was meant to be 11 bangers, and hopefully we accomplished that.
See, I do remember with Part 1, it did have a little bit of a longer feel to it, but when you were going with such a big concept, the OMNI concept that you worked with, the whole story you created around there, You want to make sure it has that cinematic feel and flow to it. Think about it from the perspective of a movie. If we're watching a movie, if we're having the soundtrack to it, it's not going to be all straightforward bangers every single step of the way, unless it's like some Nick Cage action movie, which, I mean, don't get me wrong, I would absolutely love that. But there are so many great movies where the music, it absolutely allows that emotion to flow. So you want to have those low points. You want to have those high points, that high energy. You want to have that point where it's drawn back. You want to have that ebb and flow in there to tell the story, to accurately dictate the emotion that you're trying to portray here. When it came to part 2, though, yeah, you have a little bit of a different flow to it because the story is already set. The flow of it has already been conceived through part 1. And now you have the chance to really open up and be even more creative with what you want to do to make sure you have 11 straight bangers on here. And with a runtime of about 45 minutes, I mean, you're really falling into that perfect, sweet spot when it comes to a lot of albums that are coming out today where they're usually around that 45-minute mark. I'm not saying that was intentional, but the way it happened, it kind of makes sense where if you're going with an album that has 11 bangers on it and you're right in that sweet spot, now from a optics perspective, us as the listeners, we can see this and be like, oh yeah, they're definitely going for this.
Yeah. And again, it's definitely almost the opposite approach as part 1. So, part 1 was ambitious in the sense that can we approach something this way with like a concept and making it a little bit more dramatic and cinematic and still have people love it? Because I know the bands that have attempted to do that, for the most part, in my experience as a music fan, usually fall short. So that was what I mean when I said ambitious. It's like, okay, we're trying to do this thing that's kind of deep and almost heady, and it's not as immediate. Can we still captivate people inside of that? If we can, like, I love the challenge of that. I love trying to do something that not everybody can pull off and hopefully pulling it off. And I feel like, when I listen to part 1, I'm stoked on it. I'm like, man, I get chills so many times. And that's what I was thinking as we were writing the songs. Like, how can I give people chills or give myself chills when I listen to these songs, but not stick to that so formulaic thing that so many artists fall into, where it's like here's the verse, here's the chorus. You know what I mean? The song is 3 minutes and 27 seconds long. You know what I'm saying? So as we were making it, that was what was coming out as the ultimate goal. Basically, is like, let's try to give people chills as many times as possible. Let's try to scare people in the process. Like, let's make a scary record that's about the emergence of AI and how technology is basically, taking over the world so much, and so to speak.
Yeah, when we think about that from the perspective of the OMNI story, it's very ever present. We talked about the last time we were here. We're going to bring it up again, where you're talking about AI, you're talking about technology taking over, and we're seeing that happen. We're seeing where when we first talked, AI, ChatGPT, it was a popular thing, but it was still very young. Now it's about a year later, and there are plenty of places that are implementing all these different AI abilities to their product or to their concept, and it is allowing them to, potentially make more profit, but it's giving AI a much deeper ingrained feel within whatever you're working with. I mean, the full-time job I go to, there's a whole division that's basically set up for artificial intelligence. And not gonna lie, I'm kind of looking at like, what are we actually doing? Do we actually understand this stuff? There's questions that do come up there. So a concept like this is very ever present and very connective. Taking the challenge of putting on something like this, especially from a band where you guys weren't going to be doing something that's going to be as this immersive of creating this whole entire story, this cinematic feel to it, it is a much bigger challenge, because there are bands that have done it like you guys where they're trying to challenge themselves. And a lot of times they tend to fall short because it is so very difficult, not only to create a world and captivate people like that, but when they're not used to it as your longstanding fans, are they going to be able to drive and get into that kind of mindset overall compared to a band that is always doing something like that, always creating those concept albums, always creating those stories where the fans are already ingrained in that, so it's not as difficult to get them to come over. You guys were able to achieve that with part 1, with the way you guys made it sound, the sonics, the different hills and valleys that you guys went through to really pull out all that emotion. But now when it came to part two, it's you want to give people chills, like you said. You don't want to just have that same formulaic style where, yes, there's a lot of bands that have success over that, verse, chorus, bridge, breakdown, chorus, outro, 3 minutes, 27 seconds. I do like a lot of bands that have that sound because they can do a lot of things within there, but you wanted to do something different. You wanted to make sure that when we were listening to these songs, that we were feeling that tingle up our spine. We were feeling the goosebumps pick up on us because there was something different about the construction, about the emotion, about the feel, and about the pace that this was delivered at. It's an experience. It's not something that you just want to put on willy-nilly in the background. It's something you want to be immersed inside, because when you listen to it, that emotion, that feeling you get, it gets so ingrained in you where you kind of get shook in a way, but in the best possible way.
I appreciate that, man. Yeah. And the challenge between part one and part two was connecting the two, sonically, thematically, creatively. And I feel like we approached it in a way that maybe hasn't been done before or hasn't been done very often. Whereas part one is kind of like the main story, the main sound, and part two is basically 2 EPs that represent sonically the 2 ends of the spectrum that we're trying to pull from to create the main sound, right? So we have one that's a little bit more, I guess, electronic metal, I guess, and the other's a little bit more just like straight brutal, if anything, we're talking about part two, so it's like side A. We approach that as calling it internally the digital EP. So we wanted to have a lot of digital elements, still heavy, still aggressive, but pushing a little bit more into that electronic realm. So, more program drum beats and sample synth action going on. And then part two, basically we called it the brutality EP. It's like, let's try to make something that's just gnarly. And so, here's a playlist of all the like most extreme stuff that we've done to date, 5 songs, and just hopefully punch you in the face harder than we ever have, and use that as kind of a launching pad. I'm already into the realm of thinking like we could take this further. You know what I mean? We could go further with all of the above. But for fans of heavy, you know what I mean? Like really aggressive music. I was listening to a lot of, I feel like people over reference the band Meshuggah, but like it's such a great starting point to extreme heavy music. And they've been around for so long, and everything that they put out seems to get better and better and better and better and better. So that's kind of always a staple to me. But I was also listening to a lot of like Swedish heavy stuff, like bands like Vildhjarta and Humanity's Last Breath, and a lot of other kind of obscure heavy bands, but just searching and mining for what is the heaviest, most gnarly, but still good stuff that can be influences. And so those are like kind of starting points, and then how do we make this Project 86, And I think where we arrived here is like, here's a little bit more electronic, but still kind of heavy and alternative metal take on our sound. Here's a little bit more extreme metal take on our sound, you know what I mean? But it's glued together by the concept of OMNI and by, obviously my vocal, and then just it still feels like a Project 86 product. With an asterisk being, I really feel like this is the start of something brand new rather than the final Project 86 record. It's more new than it is old, if that makes sense. So the way I really think about this in terms of like my creative endeavors, my career, the band, the brand, whatever, is Project 86 made 10 records and then was reborn into something new with OMNI. And then whatever is happening moving forward is that new thing that will still exist in this OMNI universe. So I'm even toying with a new band name for everything moving forward. I haven't officially announced this or anything, but I can tease it here. Right now, the concept in my mind is like P86 or P86 : OMNI. So, okay, it's still me. there's still a lot of elements of the mentality and the bigger picture ideation that was connected to Project 86, and this should still appeal to that core Project 86 fan base. But this is something totally brand new at the same time, and I want to stick in that sort of sci-fi, cyberpunk, dystopian. I don't like that word, but you know what I'm saying? The futurism. And let's go dark and heavy and scary and metal. And let's have something to say inside of that, and giving people who want to dig a little bit deeper, some conceptual basis for all the things that we do.
Now, that's something that really piques my interest overall because, I do remember you talking about, this is going to be the final Project 86 record with OMNI Part 1 and Part 2, but there is so much more you can go off of it. So I do understand the fact that continuing this on, but tweaking the name a little bit to connect the old with the new going forward, and still having like P86 in there or however you go with it, that still connects you to everything you guys ever did, while opening up the door for something completely new, completely different, but also still taking in all of those old elements. And when you take a listen to OMNI Part 2 for everyone that, when it drops on January 12th, which you definitely should, one thing that I noticed in there, especially from, like you said, 2 EPs come into one, that first half of the record, the more digital side of things, what I really enjoyed about that part specifically was the way that a lot of these different elements of electronics, a lot of these digitalized elements, the way you put them in there, you kept them on much more of this heavier side. I see a lot of bands out there right now, especially more like the metalcore world, where we're seeing a lot more electronics get put in there. And it's a good thing. It allows a lot more experimentation. But they all have this certain lightness feel to them, where it's a little bit more airy, it's a little bit more brighter, and it works out fine in contrast. But when you mix a little bit of a heavier digitalized sound and digitalized elements and experiences and influences into what you guys are doing, like you did on the first half of OMNI Part 2, it creates something different, but also has a different aggressive side to it that really allows people to fully embrace into the different concept of, especially the OMNI side, the digitalized AI side, seeing how that interacts with everything and how this interacts sonically with different electronic elements, the heavier elements. And I thought personally that first it allowed you guys to even be more creative because you had something new you had to try and work with, this new concept of electronics that you really had to focus in on. But how do we make it a little bit deeper so that the other instrumentation that really drives it heavier still has this nasty, snarly, massive impact that we're hoping for, and it absolutely hits and connects with the story. There's a lot of moments, especially in that first half of the OMNI Part 2, where you guys absolutely hit on that every step of the way.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that. We've always been this band that sort of walks this tightrope, right? And to some people, we don't accomplish it. To others, we accomplish it well. And that is, we want the stuff to still be somewhat accessible to like the normal heavy music fan, the fan of the band, that someone that listens to the band like Slipknot, or pick a band that's considered a little bit more mainstream heavy, you know what I mean? That isn't just like scene oriented, right?
Mm-hmm.
But still not committing so hard to like the mainstream that it's not still thoughtful. Because if you go too far towards that, it becomes real knuckleheady, you know what I mean? And like there's something about like metalcore scene, whatever, like it's a little bit more thoughtful. There's an ethos to it all, you know what I mean? And it's for a specific group of people. But the thing that I always sort of rejected about that concept is there are so many rules within the scene, right? So always want to be our own thing and not play by the rules of any genre, right? Or any piece of the puzzle in terms of like the fan base. Let's be ourselves, let's be individual, but that's going to require us walking a very difficult line between, when you go heavy and you have thick sounding guitars, it is really easy to sound knuckleheady. And all of a sudden you're in like the Nickelback realm, right? I mean, maybe that's extreme, but it's like, we don't like I was never really into like radio rock as an influence. You know what I mean? Like all of those bands, they do great at what they do, but it's never the thing that we were going for. Pick a band. You know what I mean? We all know kind of what radio rock is. But I was also like always put off a little bit by the pretension associated with like the scene. So it's like, you know, I don't want to ever try to come off like the end goal here is just to be cool. You know, I want to make music that moves people. And so when we're really doing it the right way, and this is something that we captured on Drawing Black Lines, we're kind of navigating that fence really well, where it's like there's a lot of people that sort of come from the scene that really are digging it and getting into it, but there's also a lot of people that just like heavy music, normal people, quote, that are digging it as well. And we're sort of having this universal appeal while still being this underground band and not being like commercially huge. Not to say that I wouldn't love being commercially huge, because I would, you know what I mean? But within that, you just have to be honest and true to the thing that you're trying to be or who you are, you know, as a creative, as an artist. And for me, the biggest sort of currency, I guess, is individuality. It is carving your own path and finding your own creative voice inside of navigating all these different genres and all the different ways that people try to, you know, put you in a box and, oh, you're this, you're a Christian band, or you're a metal band, or you're a hard rock band, or you're a radio rock band, or you're a new metal band, or you're, you know what I mean? You're this, you're that. And I've always hated that. I've always hated that. I'm like, I'm just going to be me and be honest. And if people like that, cool. But if I'm making stuff that is true to what I want to say and how I want to sound, and I enjoy it in terms of when I put it on, I'm proud of it, gives me chills, it makes me stoked, makes me want to smash around my house or whatever, then others are going to like it too. And you can feel this throughout the ebb and flow of my career. Those moments where I've been really tapped into that, and therefore the band has been really tapped into that at the same time, is when we've done our best work. You know what I mean? And I think this is most true on Omni, because I basically went into this record saying, I'm going to do something I've never done before. And that is, I'm coming at this with a very specific vision, sonically, lyrically, conceptually. This is what I want the thing to do to make you feel how I want it to sound. And I'm going to surround myself with people that are going to help me accomplish this. And everybody's going to come in with their own creative visions and twists on this thing. And there's room for that a little. You know what I mean? But ultimately, I'm going to fight for what I want this thing to be. And I'm going to fight harder than I ever have before, especially when I feel in my gut, that thing is not quite what I want it to be. So we're going to change that or tweak it or pivot a little bit. And that's what I've done throughout this whole process. And it's worked way better than anything that I've ever done. So when I say I've reinvented myself as a creative, that's really what it means. I've always approached working with others inside the band, producers, collaborators, engineers, mixers, video directors, whoever, as a collaborative thing. And it is this time around. And I certainly couldn't have, you know, accomplished any of this. We couldn't have accomplished this without the huge list of awesome, talented people, whether we're talking Matt Putman, Bo Burchell, George G1 Lever, you know, Grayson Stewart, Corey Brandon, everybody that's been involved in this thing. Philip Ferris, Darren King. Everybody made me feel like and proved that I was the least talented person in the room. But I also realized I have to be like the showrunner. I have to be the one who's directing everything and keeping everything on a certain trajectory. And that's the thing I've really learned this time around. And so moving forward, I'm going to approach things that way. And it really honestly makes things a lot easier for everybody involved, because here's the thing that we're trying to do. Here's how we're going to get there. As long as we stay on this path, it's going to be smooth.
There was two things actually that you mentioned throughout that whole entire just absolute incredible moment that really stood out to me. First thing was when you're bringing up, when it comes to your focus on music, wanting to still stick within that individuality and toting that line between wanting to be heavy, but not go so full into being like a knucklehead rock where it's just you turn into Nickelback, but not going so far over the side of the scene to where you're being put so much into a box where if you decide to break away from that, you're going to get so much resistance. It's going to be hard to get back to where you want to go. I think about the scene as well. Now, don't get me wrong. There's plenty of things I enjoy about it, but nothing is perfect. And I take a look at what's going on now, and there are a lot of bands that it's when they break through and they finally get some traction, everyone tries to restrict them to just that because that's what we connect with, that's what we like, that's what we enjoy, and the fans are very hesitant to let go of that because, in my opinion, we find that sound and we connect with it on such a deep level that when we listen to it, it always brings us back to a certain moment when we needed that sound the most. And when that sound starts to change, we get resistant to it because we don't want to lose out on that positive feeling that we had. However, you take a look at like the biggest bands in the scene right now, and I'm going to use Spotify numbers for this because it's just a tangible way to look at this. I don't think there are two bigger acts right now than Bring Me the Horizon, who's been changing their sound on every freaking album that they've ever done. Yeah. And Falling in Reverse, who Ronnie's always doing something wacky, insane. But look at what's happened. They've broken out of this expectation box, and whatever they release to the point, we're just waiting to see what the heck happens at this point. We're not expecting them to go into a certain genre, a certain style, and have the same exact pattern over and over again. Don't get me wrong. There are a lot of other bands that are still doing that and doing that successfully. But there's something to be said about keeping that individuality there to where you're not going to be put into this certain box, have to follow these certain rules, because in the end, you are the creative. You are the artist. Why should we have these outside rules to restrict you on what you're able to do? And given all the credit to the guys that you work with on this, saying that you're the showrunner, but the least talented person in the room, they're the ones that are able to bring this vision to light and really maximize out on this and expand your mindset creatively while showing you what can be done in the actual world by taking what's in your mind and putting it onto, putting it onto this vinyl, putting it on this track, just putting it wherever it's going to be, where people are going to hear this final product and say, this is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I like that you referenced some bands that seem to be really great at reinventing themselves over and over and over again. I just think that's fun as an artist. And I think it's also fun for the fans. It's so hard because, like, as a music fan, I can recall, almost every artist I can think of that's affected me. There's that sweet spot in their career where it's like they put out that one record or those couple records in a row. And the natural tendency is always to go, oh, why can't they just do this again? As a fan, that's where your mind's going to go because you connected with that the most. And usually, there's a reason why, right? But what we fail to realize as music fans is that music, in many ways, is just a happy accident. It's a happy accident, and it's not something that the artist can usually control, right? And the beauty of that thing and the reason why you connected with it so much is because there was an aligning of many, many, many forces and many circles which overlapped at that moment, which created, I always picture, making music as like this is really abstract, but making music is all of these like transparent circles that are floating in space, right? And everybody has a color to their circle. And when you work with other people to accomplish something creatively, where those circles intersect, the color that's made is the output, right? And so that color can be constantly evolving depending upon, who you're involving in the process. But also your color is always changing as well, because you're not the same person that you were yesterday. You have a different set of experiences that you're pulling from right now at this moment that are the strongest emotional stimuli for you, right? So you always have to be true to that strongest emotional stimulus that's coming through your experience as an individual. And that's the thing that catapults your art into being, your music into being. And as that evolves, as that changes, as you grow, as you learn, as you go further down life's path, you have different experiences, and therefore you have different priorities, you have different emphases, you have different things you're into. one of the things that, and this ties into the original thought that we're trying to connect on here.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that artists always do, it seems, is they make their best stuff early in their career, and it's usually the heaviest stuff. And I've thought about this and analyzed it for years. You get that maximized, optimized version of the band, on album 2 when they're age 24, 22, 23, 21, 25, whatever. Because that's sort of the apex of like ability. Like you're old enough and experienced enough to be proficient at what you do. So therefore, lyrically, vocally, musicianship and such. But you're still young enough that there's angst. The world is still new. You're experiencing things for the first time. There's dissonance. There's the collision of expectation and experience. And then there's disillusionment. And that's what a lot of great music and art is born out of, disillusionment, right? And so can you conjure up disillusionment? Not necessarily. You know what I mean? But can you reside in a headspace in the way that you live your life that you're constantly seeking out new experiences, i.e. staying young, and therefore creating dissonance at every life stage? If you can tap into that, then there's this whole reservoir of angst that you can still pull from to create art, right? Most people do not do this intentionally, because what happens is when you're in your 20s, you are usually, you're single, you're touring, you're doing your thing, you know what I mean? You're free. And then at some point you get locked down into a marriage or a relationship, and then you bring kids into the mix, and it becomes about finances and career maintenance and being an adult. That's what happens to most people. It's not a bad thing. It's a really good thing, But what gets compromised in there, because you lose just the free space in your brain and the free time in your schedule, is to continue discovery, traveling to new places, experiencing new things, making new friends, reading new books, trying new foods, all these things. Those are all the things that we do when we're in college, when we're young adults, that we stop doing when we become, quote, adult people. And artists do the same thing. You establish your brand, you start touring, and then you get locked into your lifestyle, right? And then it's just about maintenance. How do you upend all of that? That's what I'm constantly searching for. Just as a person, you know what I mean? How do I stay raw? How do I stay emotionally reactive? How do I stay disillusioned? You know what I mean? With the world around me. That's what OMNI is. Complete disillusionment with the world around me that I experienced primarily through the pandemic, but through other things as well prior to that. And so my job as an artist, as long as I do this, is to stay in the perpetual state of disillusionment, especially when I'm creating art that's darker, that's more extreme, that's more aggressive. That was long. I'm sorry.
I don't give a crap that was long. That was something that was utterly profound, Andrew. Jesus Christ. Because throughout that whole entire aspect, all I'm thinking about is how incredibly right you are with this. As people get older, as musicians get older, yeah, you always think about how some of their best music came out earlier on in their career. And especially from the scene side of things, it's always the heavier stuff that came earlier on. And there is a lot of that, angst still there. The proficiency is there, but the angst is still there. That disillusionment is there. That want to go out and experience new things because the world is fresh is still there. Of course, other things are going to happen in life as time goes on and priorities are going to change. You might get married. You might have kids. Finance are going to become a bigger part because now you have other people depending on you, and you have kids that you are responsible for, that you want to make sure that they're going to be in the same position that you are or better off than you when they get to that point in time where they can go out on their own. So that is always in your mind. But a lot of times, and it happens to a lot of people, is you go on autopilot. You just stick in what you know. And because it's the path of least resistance, so that you can have that career stability, you can have the financial stability, and you can make sure the people around you are taken care of, you lose the want, the luster, and the will to go out and search out new things, learn new things, have that angst to try and discover more of the world and discover more of what it has to offer. And as you get older, because right now I'm 29, I'm still going out trying these new different things, trying these new experiences. But I know as time goes on, there's going to be more of a focus that has to be put on wanting more, trying these new things, see what else I can tap into, what other experiences we can bring up to have these instances. Because the last thing I ever want to do is just go through life on autopilot. I've always thought about this and I can't stand it. And for myself, I remember being 22 years old, leaving college, and then going into work for my first full-time job. And I was wondering if life was even worth living anymore after a couple of months, because everything became so utterly mundane. And this is literally why the podcast exists right now, because I did not want my life to be utterly mundane. And conversations like this just absolutely fire me up. But I hope it fires up everyone else as well, and musicians as well, because you're an artist, you're creative. Find that creativity, find that will, find that want. Even if life does change, you can find other ways to create that. If you're a parent, there's going to be new things in life that come up because you're a parent, because of your kids. Find those new things, find that creative energy, find that the reservoir of just absolute, new profound angst that you might be able to put it into your creative aspect, and you're going to create something that could be utterly fantastic and utterly expansive compared to even what you did previously, because there is so much more there you can tap into with all these different new experiences, because the world and the universe are boundless. It's endless. There's so many new things that we can experience as you get older. And when you get to that point where you're on your deathbed, there's a lot of things still in life that you have never even thought of experiencing or even knew was a chance to have happen. So there's never going to be a limit on what you can and can't have or experience.
Amen, brother. Yeah, love all that. I mean, the bands that age like fine wine, I'm totally of the opinion, find a way to tap into that fountain of youth mentality, where they stay connected to their emotions and the things that made them want to do this to begin with. I don't know if that's a gift. I don't know if that's intention. I can only speak for myself. I don't know how to live life any other way, than to stay connected to, that desire to keep discovering and to keep trying to experience new realms of disillusionment. I bring it back to that word because what is disillusionment? It's where expectation meets reality, right? Your expectations don't match with reality, therefore you get disappointed and you experience pain, and in that pain you go, why? And then you start, and in that pain, and all the sub questions that come along with why, and the wrestling with reality, if you turn that towards creative energy, I believe that is the best place that everyone can reside, in terms of, throughout history. That's the best place for the artist to reside, is that questioning, that why are things the way they are, and inside of that, we find answers, and we also encourage others to think critically about their experience, and maybe help provide a sense of hope and even answers inside of asking those questions. But I always tell people on my podcast, I say, it's not my job to tell you how things are. It's my job to get you to ask the questions, by pushing some buttons, and to reevaluate your perspective on things, to reevaluate your experience and the decisions that you're making and the way that you're living your life. If I do that, then I'm doing my job. And it is a job. People don't think of it that way, but it is a job. I have a job to do for the people who support me, because my career is a listener supported endeavor. I do this full time, and I always have. And therefore I'm beholden to the people who are basically investing in me and the products that I put out, which is an incredibly capitalistic way to put it, but it's true. The joke that I always make is like, I thought I was signing up for, being an artist and being on stage and being a performer and an artist. But really what I was signing up for was a sales and marketing position. Right?
Yeah.
So within that, I have to find a way to upend that part of the equation by just really dissolving myself inside the creative process. Right now is one of those moments where it's so hard to do that because there's so much admin and so much not creative that goes into what I do, on a day-to-day basis. And people don't like to talk about that because it's boring. But the reality is, for every hour that you're on the stage, there's probably 20 hours of work that goes into that moment, right? And let's talk about, putting content out into the world, music, an album, we're talking hundreds of hours, man hours, many different people working on stuff. Just so you could say, I don't know if I like that breakdown. You know what I'm saying? But there was so much effort that went into making that thing. And if it's done right, it'll tap into the consciousness of many people. I don't really even think in terms of, at the end of the day, how many people will be affected by something I'm making. I really just think about, and this is a total sidebar, but I just thought of this as I was talking. And it kind of goes back to something I said earlier. If I just make something that I like really like, and I make that the end goal, then I know that other people will like it. And if that thing happens to be, unique, which it will be if it's, if I'm relaxed and I'm just trying to, put my voice out into the world, that's a success. That is success right there. To me, especially, I don't equate success necessarily with like whatever car I'm driving or like how many bedrooms my house has. Those are fine, but the more stuff you own, the more it owns you. To quote Fight Club, you know what I mean?
Yep.
It's really true. Like, my goal in life is to make the art that I enjoy making my entire journey in this world, and have enough people enjoy that as well that I'm able to continue on that path. And that's hopefully going to live a lot longer than I do.
I hope to God it lives a lot longer than you do. Like, I mean, that's for any artist, that their art lives a lot longer than they ever possibly could. Whether you're a painter, sculptor, musician, whatever it might be, whatever kind of creative you might be. And there's a lot of that, especially I think on OMNI Part 2, that really shows through that, where you're making exactly what you wanted, what you like. You want to tap into those emotions. You want to make sure you gave people those chills. And you want to make it in a way where people just want more of it because it's what you wanted to do and because you wanted more of it. For me personally, because I know we're kind of run low on time a little bit from what you want to make sure you can go and continue on with your rest of your day. But for me specifically, listening to the X and the Y, that song hit me in such a completely different way than everyone else that you made on this album, specifically because I don't know what you were trying to go with there, but especially the way that the chorus hit, the melodic chant style you had there, the way that especially the drums, they hit so full and heavy on every aspect of it. It sounded like this epic Greek tragedy being told through a song. And it's just the power that was behind it. I was just being transported mentally in like movie style to all these different great movie epics about, Greco-Roman wars. Just these absolute emotions of that. But at the same time, it's like humans and AI fighting off each other, trying to see who's going to be the best. But it's such this powerful moment where everything that came out of that song, I was listening to it right before we even jumped on here. And I was sitting here just thinking, my God, this is absolutely fantastic. And then that bridge, it goes silent. And then the chorus comes right back in after. I'm like, wait, I was expecting a breakdown there or something. But the way the chorus came back in, just keeping up with that epic Greek tragedy type feel with how much power it had behind it, that was such an epic win. Holy shit.
Thanks, man. Thank you. Yeah, that's definitely the break on side 2 of the album. It's not a break. It's just the least, quote, heavy song. But it's got like this punk energy to it. Big shout to Corey and Matt on that one. Um, yeah, that's kind of like, whereas we have like interludes and such on part one,
Mm-hmm.
that's the interlude of part two. Um, which I mean, it's still a banger. It's like the fastest song on the on side two. Uh, yeah, just talking song to song on part two before we hop off here. Like, I really think Ultra Violent, which is track two on side two, is the lead track on the entire Omni album. We just dropped a music video for that. You check it out. Like, we brought Omni City to life. There's an entire 3D animated Unreal Engine universe in the music video that came to, as well as this crazy like lab thing. Big shout to Adam Standen, our director on that one, who just built some fantastic environments. Um, I really feel like Ultraviolent is such a win on part two. It's super heavy, but it's also kind of a bridge between, you know, what this thing is now versus what it was before. You know, it's a diverse song, and it's an interesting song in the sense it was three discarded demos that were glued back together by Matt Putman, one of our producers, and they're in different keys, even different time signatures, different
What?
keys. Yeah, and like when he when he showed it to me, I was like, okay, wow, it's gonna take me a while to wrap my head around this because I'm hearing the original ideas and how they're kind of glued back together. And then I was just like, no, man, that really works. And then when we recorded it, it was initially going to be a song that was like a not a B-side, but it was a song that was going to be an exclusive song for the highest tier of our Patreon community, because I do that sometimes with them. We'll do exclusive music just for Patreon folks. And then once I showed it to a few people, they're like, "You're not going to release this?" I was like, "Well, it's just for, you know, a small group of people that, you know, are my highest, biggest supporters, whatever." And they're like, "You got to release this, dude. This is an amazing song." So I showed it to more people, and I would like play that song, and I wouldn't tell them anything about it. Just play that song, and they'd be like, "What was that?" And I was like, "Oh, it's this new song, blah blah blah." And then I'd show them a couple other ones that were on side two, and they'd be like, "No, that first one's the jam." So it was kind of like, all right, this is going to be the biggest song on Omni. So we did the music video. That's the first single for part two. And then my second favorite song on part two is Pariah, which is track one on the second side of part two, which is, I guess if we're going in order, that's like track 7 on part two or track 19 on the record. Pariah is just this like brutal, thrashy, like gnarly, the downtuniest of downtuniest guitar, really fast, but there's a lot of breaks on it. There's some really great breakdowns. It's just a crazy song. I love Pariah. But if you're into just like really extreme heavy stuff that still has just a small element vocally of accessibility, not saying there's a lot of singing, but like you can just kind of understand the words basically with it still being pretty low in terms of the scream register. You'll dig, you know, side two of part two. And I think the digital EP though, like side one of part two, um, is going to be the thing that people like the most because the songs are great. Like track 6, Trench Ejector, I'm being told is like the dark horse of the whole record because like it just sort of came out of left field. Like everybody just loves that track. It's really, really heavy, but really kind of like catchy too. And it's like we try to not go like too Rammstein with it, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
or Rammstein or whatever. But it's kind of like old Nine Inch Nails meets Meshuggah or something, you know. It just has that kind of vibe. But there are a lot of really big moments on part two that I'm really proud of. And I think if you gave Omni Part One a chance, you should give Omni Part Two a chance. If you're a fan of anything from Gojira to anything in metalcore, I think you'll like this. You know, there isn't as much singing vocal, you know what I mean, but there's a lot of heavy stuff in there that I think you'll gravitate towards. There's a lot of diversity on Omni Part Two, some real bangers on there as well. It's hard, man, to hype your own stuff. I don't like hyping my own stuff. I do like talking about what I like about it, but I don't like talking about why it's awesome. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But the more you talk about why you like it, I mean, you're essentially hyping up in that realm, and I can hype it up a little bit too, because for me, I'm more from the metalcore side, especially for my ear listening fandom. I really like the first part of it, especially more the digital side of it, just because that fits a little bit more with what I was essentially getting in my head, and it really hit with me. Especially, I mean, again, I brought up the X and the Y, going to ultraviolet. Again, for me, it was like mixing more of that aggressive metal style matched perfectly with electronic, fast-paced energy, like you're playing a Resident Evil video game. That was something that really stuck out to me, but you still gave a great rundown of all of it for everyone to get into. So if you liked OMNI Part 1, you definitely should check out OMNI Part 2. If you were like, I wasn't into OMNI Part 1, you should definitely check out OMNI Part 2. If you have not checked out OMNI Part 1, check it out and check out OMNI Part 2. If you're like, who is Project 86? Check out OMNI Part 2. That should take care of it, right?
Yeah, that's it, man. And obviously, if you're on YouTube, our channel is just at Project 86 Video. And you can check out, we have 5 animated style music videos, live action meets animation, basically, on our channel. And check out our latest video for Ultraviolent, and stream the new album if it's January 12th or later when you hear this.
You just did my whole entire first part of my job for me to close out this episode. So, my God, Andrew, thank you. You put it out there perfectly. But now as we bring this episode close, I'm bringing up 3 specific things. First things first. Literally, Andrew, everything Andrew just said. When it comes to OMNI coming out on Part 2 coming out on January 12th, when it comes to watching music videos, when it comes to finding them online, when it comes to supporting them, joining the Patreon, everything about that, best thing you do is allow me to be your own personal Google. Go script for the podcast where it says find Project 86 online, links, labels for everything are going to be down there, so you have no excuse to not get into this stuff, not listen to it. I'm making sure that you guys do this. It's all down there, so do it. Do it. And now, Andrew, time for part 2. I had you on in early 2023, and I said I was going to make you a promise that when I got to see you perform live for the first time, that I was going to look for you, find you, pursue you, whatever it is, Liam Neeson Taken style. But when I finally found you, I was going to say hi, and the first round was on me. Well, dude, I haven't seen you play live yet, but I still have to hold up that promise. But now you've been on twice, so it's not first round, it's first 2.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Yeah, we're doing an album release show in Nashville if you're in the area. March 1st and 2nd, we're going to have like a release party weekend, Friday and Saturday night. So that's going to be really cool. The show itself on March 2nd it'll be a live stream event as well. So like if you can't make it in person, and it's limited seating, it's a small theater venue, but it's going to be really cool. If you can make it out, March 2nd is the date to join us. But if not, we'll be selling tickets online as well, so that you can experience it virtually. So that will be pretty cool. And then we have another date that we're about to add in Raleigh, North Carolina on March 9th. So we got a couple dates coming up. We'll have more coming down the pipe after that to support OMNI for sure.
Either I'm going to have to road trip or I might have to wait to see what those other dates are, but I'll find you at some point, man. I'll find you at some point.
Sounds good to me.
Some of these live. And now number 3, as we bring this to its full conclusion, man, this is your second time on the podcast. Maybe even better than the first. I don't know. Both times were absolutely fantastic. This cannot be the last time I have you on, man. This was fantastic. So this is not goodbye. This is, I'll see you later.
For sure, man. Pleasure's all mine, brother.
Well, folks, it's my interview with Andrew from the band Project 86. Now it's time for Kevin's final thought. When Andrew was talking about when it comes to artists and as they continue to get older, why it seems like a lot of their work on a consistent basis is not as good as some of the stuff they did when they were younger, based off of that feeling of disillusion and based off of that want to try and go out and do more. Because, of course, as time goes on, responsibilities change, priorities change. You might have a spouse, you might have kids, you might have different financial needs, and you might need to make sure that you are consistent over other things as well. Make sure that consistency is key to support your family. But think about it from this perspective, because I think about it from my perspective as well. I remember, 22 years old, out of college, and I felt like I had the world on my shoulders and the world out in front of me because I just got done with college. I was able to do whatever I wanted. I was able to study whatever I wanted. I had that disillusionment to me to go out and try and learn new things, discover new things, have new experiences. when I got into the corporate working world, and about 3 months in, I started to just absolutely dread it, dread life, everything, for the specific reason because it felt like for me at that point, that was it. Like, the rest of life was going to be so structured and so by the book that I didn't have to learn anything new. There was no need to. And that depressed the ever-loving hell out of me and sent me into a spiral, along with a couple other things that sent me into a spiral of deep depression. And the podcast essentially is the response to that, to get back out there, try something new, trying to figure out how to make this work, trying to figure out new things to make this happen, and trying to always discover how I can reinvent this thing, how I can always make this thing even better. It adds to that disillusionment, it adds to that angst to keep going, to keep doing this stuff. And it makes sense why, when I'm at my full-time job, because I still have to work a full-time job right now, why I'm so much more apathetic towards it compared to the podcast. When I have to talk with people for my full-time job, man, I just have no energy there. I kind of get stuck and tired, but I kind of have to always try and bring it once again due to the fact that, I want to make sure I'm like this. But then when the podcast comes on, this is all natural. Like, once I see that first little icon pop up in the Zoom conversation, my energy flies through the roof and I'm just on riding a wave of positivity. You could put 5 episodes for me in a row. I might be completely burnt out by the time we start the 5th one, but that 5th one, I am flying still because I am just jacked up on energy for this stuff. Jacked up on that positivity, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And the podcast also helps me keep that disillusionment when in a world where everyone else wants you to be a certain way, especially the corporate world, where they want you to fit, act, dress, look a certain way. I don't. I mean, I go on calls with people and they are wearing button-up shirts and looking nice and whatnot. I get a call, I look like this. I literally looked like this, except I was wearing my Voice of Batchaprot t-shirt. And I gave one hell of a presentation, and they asked me why I wore it. I'm like, because you remember it. That was simple. And plus, it was me. So it actually kind of was like, but yeah, keep that disillusionment to yourself so that you can consistently go out and seek out new opportunities, seek out new things in life, and have a good time with it. So when it comes to Project A6, when it comes to OMNI, link to the podcast below, links, labels for everything, social media, YouTube, where you can stream the music, you can join the Patreon page, and where you can go check them out live as well. Also, make sure you go down the Chord Progression Podcast description down here, hit follow on our Facebook, or follow whatever, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Subscribe to YouTube right down here. Also hit subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're getting this podcast. New episodes every single Tuesday and Thursday throughout 2024. Yeah, we're going for it. And on YouTube, get those Friday reaction videos. Also hit like on it right down here on YouTube or anywhere on the Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever else you might be getting this thing. Thank you very much. Helps us out a lot. Thank you, Andrew. Another great conversation with you, man. And can't wait to see you in 2024. And a live show. On that note, that's what we do, guys. Thank you for watching, listening to the Chord Progression Podcast. My name is Kevin, and you guys know I end every single one of these episodes big, healthy, and hearty. See ya! Yeah.